Hey everyone. So we are now going to start the integration part of our application. In the last streaming, we have already created the backend. Okay. So let me just show this to you. We have created our backend. Okay. All the APIs are ready. And now we have already, run our application backend successfully. You can see our MongoDB connection is successful. Server is listening. Okay. There are no errors over here right now. So this means we can now start integrating our APIs. Okay, we have all the authentication routes ready, and also we have user routes ready. Then we also have the event listener set it up over here inside the socket server. You can see. So that means we are going to now make API calls, and also we are going to emit some events from our client side. So that is how we are going to interact with the backend. Okay. Now, let me just go to our front-end repo. This is our front-end repo. It's running on localhost 5173 right now. You can see that. Let me just open it up on the browser. Okay. And we can see, okay, there is this login page. Okay. Then we have the sign up page. When we click on create account, we'll be, sent to this verify account page. Okay. And after the verification is successful and account is created, we'll get to the conversations screen. Okay. Then we also have the profile section along with update password. Okay. So what we are going to do, first of all, we need to make sure that we are able to, register a user and verify their email with the help of OTP. After that is done, we'll be able to, log in to the application. So we have to first of all take care of the authentication part. Okay. So what I'm going to do inside this video is let's go inside source, then Redux, and we are going to focus on building the slices. Okay. So right now we don't have any authentication slice. So I'm just going to create one. Let's call it auth.js. Okay. Now what is going to happen inside this auth slice? We are going to manage the token of the user using which the user will be able to log into the application and perform actions, and along with that we are also going to manage if the user is currently in the logged in state or not. Okay, so let's see how we are going to do that. First of all, let me remind you that we have already created one slice called app.js, and in order to create a slice, we are going to make use of this method called create slice, which will be, coming from Redux.js slash toolkit. Okay. So we are making use of Redux toolkit to create the slices. Okay. Then we define the reducers, and here is our reducer functions that we define below. Okay. And we are basically combining all the reducers over here inside this root reducer. Then this root reducer is used inside a store. You can see that here we are basically configuring the reducer. All the reducers are combined into one root reducer, and then it's used to configure our Redux store. So that is the flow of our Redux. Now let's actually go back inside auth.js, and what I'm interested in is, first of all, let's define the initial state of the authentication slice. So initial state will contain some you know values. So inside this object I'm just going to define is loading. Now this is the state which will be useful whenever, let's say, when we are submitting the register form. Okay, and then we want to show the loading spinner on the button that the form is getting submitted. So for that we are going to make use of this state is loading. So it will be either true or false, but at the start it's always going to be false. So whatever we are defining the values here, they are the initial values. Okay, since it's the initial state. And whenever some error happens during the authentication, we are going to store that error over here. So by default, the error will be set to null because at the start, we are going to have no error. Okay. Then whenever a user is logged in, they're going to have a token. Okay. This is our JWT token that I'm talking about. So we are also going to store the token inside the slice, but the initial value of the token will be set to null. And we are also going to have the user data over here. Okay. That is the currently logged in user data. By default, it will be set to just an empty object. Okay, but later on when we fetch the user using the get me endpoint, this is going to contain the real data of the user. Okay, now the last thing, which is logged in. So this field, it's already it's telling you what it's going to basically signify. It's going to tell us whether the user is currently logged in or not. So by default, user will not be logged in, so I'm setting its current state to false. Okay, now, in order to create the slice, we need the create slice method. Okay. Now, over here, I'm just going to write create slice. Okay. Let me correct the spelling. Create slice, and you see it will be imported from Redux.js slash toolkit. Okay. Now inside this, we need to first of all provide the name property. So the name for the slice, I want to call it auth. Okay. Then we are also going to specify the initial state. Okay. And after that, we are going to define the reducers inside it. Okay. Now the first thing is I want to define set error, and each reducer is going to get the previous state along with the action object. So here what we are going to do inside, let's say, the set error, we can see that inside the initial state we have something called error. So on the previous state, I'm just going to access the error property, and I'm going to set its current value to whatever we get inside the payload, which will be present on the action. Okay. So now this action will be given by the whenever we dispatch an action. Okay, we are going to get this payload from that. So we'll see how this is going to work. Everything will be wired up correctly, and you'll see that. And after set error, I want to create another thing which is similar to this one called set loading. Now, please remember that whenever we want to, show that the form is loading or the data is getting submitted, we are going to set this loading property to true. Okay. And after the form submission is successful, we get a response from the server. We are going to again set it to false. Okay. So what we are going to do inside set loading, we just want to, update the value of is loading properties. So that can be done by accessing the previous state by writing this state dot is loading, and then the current value will be inside action dot payload. So I can just assign it like that. Okay. So now we have created our very basic reducers over here. And now what I want to do is, let's just, in order to get the reducers out of the slice and wire them up inside the root reducer, first of all I need to reference it. So here I'm just going to write const slice equals to and this. So when we call create slice along with these configuration, we are going to get a slice, and from this slice we are going to get the reducers and actions. Okay, so here I'm just going to write export default. Here I just want to export the reducers that we have inside this slice. Okay. And here I'm just going to write const inside curly bracket. I'll just destructure the actions. So let me write slice dot actions, and here you can destructure these that we created set errors, that is set loading. Okay. So I'm just going to write it like that. This will be these actions will be used inside the reducer function that we are going to create shortly. But for now, the first thing that we should do is, after we created the slice and after we are ready after exporting the reducer, we can go to root reducer. And over here, this is a very important step. Okay, so please make sure that you don't escape it even by mistake. So here I'm just going to write auth reducer. We are importing auth reducer from, and then the path to that file, which is slices slash auth, not app but auth. So let me write auth. Okay. Then over here inside command reducer, I'm just going to write the key, which is auth. Okay. And here the reducer, which is auth reducer. Okay. So now we have correctly set it up our reducer. Okay. So next thing is we can start creating, different actions inside it, and then we'll also create the reducer functions. So first thing I want to focus on is registering the user. Now let me tell you that whenever we are going to make some API call, okay, and after the API call we are going to basically get the response back from the server. So everything is going to happen inside these reducer functions that we are going to create now. So let me just write register user. Okay. So over here, let's create the function. I'm just going to write export function. This is going to be a simple function. Let's call it register user. Now, whenever we want to register a new user, just think what we're going to need. We're going to need their name, email, and password. Okay. That means this form that you see over here. These are the fields that we are going to need: their name, email, password, and confirm password. Okay. So we need to accept the form data over here. So I'm just going to write form data, or you can also call it form values, whatever you prefer. Okay. So it's up to you. The name is up to you. What matters is that you understand what we are basically getting over here as the argument. Now, inside this function, we are going to return another function. Okay. So this is actually a higher order function. So here I'm just going to return an asynchronous function from inside it, and this function is going to get two things, dispatch and get state. Now this get state can be used to get the state of the store at any inside any reducer function. Okay, and this dispatch will be used to dispatch the actions. Okay, so what we're going to do right now, whenever we make an API call, in order to register a user, first of all, please understand that we need to contact our server. So basically, we need to make API call. So here I'm just going to write make API call. Now let's also understand which API we should call in order to register the user. So for that, we need to take a look at our backend. Now inside backend, we have routes folder, which contains this auth.js, and here you see an endpoint called /signup. So this is the endpoint that we want to hit along with the form data for registering the user, right? Now inside this registry, you can also see what we require. So inside this, you can see from the request body, we need these three fields. Okay, so this is going to be our form data is going to contain these three things that we need to make sure from the client side. And after that, we need to, think about how we are going to, hit this particular endpoint. So for that, just go to this index.js. Here you can see we have the path starting from auth, and actually you should start, from app.js. So when we go down over here, you can see we have, implemented our routes like this, app.use routes. Now this routes is actually this index.js. So we don't have something like slash v1 or slash API at the start, but I can also write that over here. If I want, I can just, write something like API slash v1. Okay. Then in this case, what you need to do, if I write it like this, then you need to make the API call to slash API slash v1 slash auth /signup. Then only the request will be sent to this particular endpoint, and also the method should be post. Okay. Please understand that the method that we are going to use in order to make the API call for sign up will be post, because here the router on the router you can see the method is set to post. Okay, so you need to follow the path that is according to the API specification. Here right now actually I'm just going to remove this thing. Let me just directly keep it as routes. Okay, so in that case we need to make the API call to auth/signup, and the method should be post. Now let's also understand that our server is running on port 8000, and since it's running on localhost, so we need to actually make the API call to http colon slash slash localhost port 8000. Okay, and after that this path. So this is actually the URL on which we want to make the API call, and the method should be post. I hope you understand. Okay, now over here, before making the API call, we need to do two things. And those are, first of all, it's always possible that due to the previous API call, this loading status and the error status might not be set to the default value, which is the initial value. So before making any API call, okay, a fresh API call, we are always going to make sure that we dispatch two things. First is we want to dispatch set error. So let's write set error, and you can see this set error is actually expecting a payload value. So I want to always set the error to null value before making a fresh API call. So I'm going to pass null inside it. And similarly, I'm going to also dispatch set loading. Now this set loading is also expecting some payload value, which will be, setted equal to the is loading state. So here, before making the API call, I just want to set it to false. Okay, so the loading status will be, sorry, not false, but true, because whenever we are making the API call, we always, we set it to true so that the loading spinner starts showing inside the form button. Okay, and user knows that okay, the form is getting submitted behind the scenes. Okay, it's processing. So this is what we need to do. Now after that, we need to make the API call. Okay, and let me tell you that in order to make the API calls, we are going to make use of the package called Axios. Okay, so you can just go to your browser and go to npmjs.com. Now here you need to search for this package called Axios. Okay, this is what we're going to use. Okay, you can see uh, that it's like a very popular package. It has 41 million weekly downloads. So I'm just going to copy the installation command, go back to my terminal on the client side, and install this package. Now, when this package is getting installed, okay, it's already installed. So what we are going to do, let's go to the utilities folder, and inside this utilities folder, I'm going to create a new file. Let's call it Axios. Okay. Now, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create my Axios instance over here, and I'm also going to set up some interceptor on that. So let's see how that is done. So here, first of all, in order to make use of the Axios package, the obvious step is to import the package first of all. So let's write import Axios from, and then the package name, which is Axios. Okay. And the next thing is we need to configure the base URL. Okay. Now, what is base URL? Base URL is the URL on which we need to make the API call. The path can change. Let me again take you back to the backend code over here. When I was telling you about this URL on which we need to make the request, this part is always going to remain the same for each and every route, but only this part at the end is going to differ. So this first part, this is called the base URL. Okay. So now we need to set up the base URL over here. So let me just define const base underscore URL, and this will be equal to a string. Here I'm just going to set it to HTTP local host port 8000. And you understand why we are setting it to localhost port 8000, because our server is running on localhost and the port on which the application is running is 8000. You can see that over here. Server is listening on port 8000. Okay. So now we have set it up our base URL. Next thing is we are going to create the Axios instance. So let's write Axios instance equals, and in order to create Axios instance, we just need to get the Axios package and call the create method on it. Now inside this create, we are going to pass a configuration. Actually, we need to pass this field called base URL. There are a lot of things that you can configure. You can see over here, but what I need to configure right now is just base URL property. So base URL, this will be equal to the base URL that we have defined over here. Now, after we have the Axios instance, the obvious thing is to export it out of this file so that we can use it somewhere else. So export default Axios instance. And before we export it, I want to do one more thing, and that is adding some interceptors on it. So here I'm just going to write Axios instance, and on this we can write interceptors. Okay, and I want to intercept the response. So whenever we make an API call and we get the response back, I want to basically intercept the response. Okay, and on that I'm going to actually place this middleware. What it's going to do, it's going to we are going to first of all create a callback. If we get a successful response, then we are just going to forward that response to the next middleware. Otherwise, if we get an error, okay, in the second case, when we get the error, API call gives us error, then what we're going to do, we're going to uh, send this promise dot reject, and over here I'm going to pass this thing error dot response. If we get a response, then we are going to use this one. Otherwise, we are going to use here. I'm just going to place this AND operator, error dot response dot data. Okay. Otherwise, if we don't have error dot response and data, then we are going to just pass this thing. Something went wrong. This is the generic error message that we are going to show to the user. So something went wrong. Okay. Now, this we have set the interceptor on the response that we get. If we get a successful response, we are just going to forward it to the next middleware. Otherwise, we are going to intercept it and return this promise dot reject along with this value. Now, after this Axios instance is set it up, we need to import it inside our auth.js file, because here at this point, when we are registering the user, I need to make the API call. And let me also check if there are any questions in the comment section. Okay, I'll actually answer this general query, okay, about how to learn React and how to build projects. For now, I'm just going to actually focus on this one. I would suggest you to join the Discord server and post your query over there. I'll help you out. So let's now continue with our project over here. So in order to make the API call, we need the Axios package, sorry, Axios instance that we created. So here I'm just going to write import and then Axios from, and then the file, which is our, I have gone one step up, then one more step up. And here you can see we have the utils folder inside which we have the Axios file. So now I'm actually, importing the Axios instance from the Axios instance that we created. Now over here, we are going to write await, and then on this Axios instance, I can use the method like post get. Let me just show you. If I write post, you can see we have post. We also have, get, fetch. We also have this delete. Okay, so there are these methods. Okay, if methods that we are going to use in order to make the API calls. For now, what I want to do is I want to make a post call. So let me just write over here dot post. Okay, and why we are writing post, you have to be clear about that. So we are actually using this post method because inside our API you can see the router is set to post over here on the sign up endpoint. So let me just write post, and after that we need to specify the path. So the path will be after the base URL. So we have already specified base URL inside our Axios instance that you can see over here. It's already configured. So what is left is the remaining part, which is this auth slash sign up after this slash. So slash auth slash sign up. So we need to first of all pass that inside our over here. Let me take you back to the auth.js, and over here you need to pass that path. Okay. So let me just write inside the post. We are going to write slash auth slash sign up. Okay, and after we specify the path, the next thing is to submit the body. Now in order to give the request body, we are just going to destructure this form data, because the form data is going to be in the it's going to be uh, in an object format. So I'm just going to destructure all the values over here. We can also specify it like this. I can create request body over here, request body. Let me write it like this, rec body, which means request body. And this is actually going to be an object which contains all these fields which are inside the form data. So you can write it like this, and in place of this object you can just write request body. Okay, this is actually the same thing. Now after specifying the request body inside the post call, we need to also specify the headers. Now in order to specify header, there will be a third argument. Inside this, you see, you can specify lots of things, and what we need right now is called headers, and that will be over here. Yeah, this one, headers. Now inside headers, there are lots of different types of headers that we can actually place. Okay, you can see there are this content encoding, content length, user content type. What we need is content type, and we are also going to make use of another header which is called authorization later on when we make the calls to protected endpoints. So right now the content type for this will be set it to application slash JSON. Okay, because we are sending the JSON body, and also we expect to get a response in the JSON format. Okay, so this is how we have set it up our API call. Now after this API call runs, we are going to chain then and catch method on it. So inside that, let's actually create this function, callback function. Here we are going to receive the response. Okay, and inside this callback, I can just console log the response, and then we'll see what we have to do with that data. Then similar to this, we are also going to, catch the error. So let's change this catch method. Here, once again, I'm going to create an anonymous function, and let's get the error over here. And when we get the error, we are going to again console log the error. So let me just write console.log error. And over here, I'm just going to write console.log response. Okay. And after we do this, then and catch, I also want to, add one more step to this, and that will be the final step. So we are going to chain dot finally over it, dot finally. Now inside this again, we are going to create a callback. Okay. And inside this finally, what we are going to do, whatever we get, whether it's a successful response or we get an error, we are going to now set the loading state back to false inside the finally state. So let me set loading state back to loading state back to false using this set loading action. Okay, so I hope this is clear what we are doing inside it. And if we get an error, then also we are going to call this dispatch set error with the actual error object inside this catch block. So let me also write that over here. So we are going to dispatch set error if we get into the catch block, and we'll pass the error inside the set error as the payload content. Okay. So this is our register user function. Okay, reducer function. So you can see this is actually, going to make the API call. Then on that API call, on that API calls response, we are going to, act by dispatching some action. Now the next question is, how do we need to call this register user? Okay, you cannot call this like a normal function. Let me warn you about that. You cannot just, go to, let's say, your pages and then go to auth and then inside sign up, and you cannot just, write over here like this const submit form. Okay, I'm just, this is for the example purpose. I'm telling you what's wrong, what you should not do. So you create, let's say you create this function and submit form, and inside this you just call the register user with the form data. Okay, form data will be an object containing the, name, email, and password. So over here, you cannot do it like this. Why? Because this is not a normal function. You can see over here, this function is going to return another function, and that function is going to get these two things, dispatch and get state as the argument. So we need a special way to, call this. And in order to use this reducer function, we are going to create dispatcher over here. And in order to create the dispatcher, we can use this use dispatch hook from React Redux. Okay. So use dispatch, you need to first of all get it imported from React Redux. You can see on this line. And after that, you need to call this use dispatch in order to create the dispatch function. Now, inside this dispatch, you can write the reducer function, which is this register user along with the form data. Okay. Now, we haven't actually, imported this register form yet from the uh, auth.js file, but we are going to do that. So for now, I'm just going to, comment out this thing. This was, just for, explanatory purpose. We have to first of all do the form handling inside this form, and only after that we'll be collecting the data from the form. After we have the data and the validation set it up, then we are going to implement our submit functionality. Okay, I hope that is clear. So now let me see if there are any more questions in the comment section. Okay, so there are no questions right now. Okay, so I hope you understand how we have set it up our, store for this auth.js. Then we wired it up inside our root reducer. Then after that, after we defined our, slice and reducers and actions, we created this function which is going to help us make the API call. Then I also explained you how, like, what is the reason behind, writing it like this, how we are specifying the path, what is the request body, how we are setting up the headers. And after that, we also how we are going to basically handle response error, and how we're going to, set the loading state back to false. So this is all for this particular stream. Now in the next one, I'm just going to, use this same concept that I have taught inside this particular stream. That is this making these API calls. Okay. I'm not going to explain you again and again like what will be the route for any particular, endpoint. I'm just going to, get the endpoint from here. I'll copy and paste it directly. So now we are going to create these reducer functions for each and every endpoint. That is the first step that we need to, make sure which is completed. After that, we'll be doing form handling. Okay. By form handling, I mean managing the state of the form, because you see on our UI, we have lots of form over here, like this sign up form, login form, and even when we create the account inside this application, we also have the profile form, update password form. So after we are done with setting up our reducer functions for making API calls, we are going to move to this step where we do the form handling part. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Thank you everyone for watching this live stream. And if you're watching the recorded video, also you can, post your doubts in the comment section. I'll be reading them and I'll help you out. Also, if you want to interact with me directly, then you can join the Discord server. Link is given in the channel page. So that's it for this one. I'm going to take a very short break and I'll be back with another live stream.